Welcome, everyone. This is Joe Dager, the host of the Business 901 podcast. With me today is Stephen Wunker. Stephen has a long track record of creating successful ventures. His accomplishments include leading the team that created one of the world's first smartphones, and he has pioneered both mobile commerce and mobile marketing in addition to his entrepreneurial and corporate venturing experience. He is a long-term colleague of Clayton Christensen, and he now leads New Market Advisors, a firm dedicated to empowering companies to innovate and grow. As an author, he has written several books, which one I feel is a hidden classic that has been at my side for many years, named Capturing New Markets. And he has a new book just recently published titled Jobs to be Done. Thanks for joining me, Steve, and tell me about your consultancy, New Market Advisors.
It's great to be here, Joe. Thanks very much for having me. So in our consulting firm, New Markets Advisors, we do what the name says. We counsel companies on new markets, which may be for new products. It might be changing sets of customers. It could be geographic expansion as well. But the tools that we use for doing that are ones that we found can be generalized to a really wide array of circumstances. While my first book, Capturing New Markets, really focused on new markets, this current book, Jobs to be Done, provides a toolkit which you can definitely use in new markets, but it can be applied for just improving the customer experience at your corner bakery. It really has a very broad set of circumstances where it could be useful.
Capturing New Markets, did that come out along with your consultancy about the same time? Name sounds a little familiar.
Well, I'd like to say I took the bad company strategy of branding. It was the name of the band, the album, and the title track. So, trying to get it through. So same thing with Capturing New Markets. That's right. I had been working on that thinking for quite some time. But when I started New Markets Advisors in 2009, I started work on the book as well. Now, I had been with Clayton Christensen, as you mentioned, for many years. Some of the lessons I put in there were ones that I learned the hard way. The consulting and then the practitioner view in that book. And then going forward, I realized what people really need is a very actionable set of tools that they can put to use Monday morning. One of the chapters in Capturing New Markets was revolving around jobs to be done. There was a lot of interest in that chapter, so that was a clue to me that what people wanted was a way to apply this concept of jobs to be done, which Clay Christensen originated back in 2003 and which I'd been trying to put into practice since then.
Reading your book, I have to admit, the Job to be Done book, it does not come across all theory, okay? You have very practical, pragmatic knowledge of the subject. And have you practiced it? I mean, as you mentioned there, is that what really kind of your deep dive over the last few years?
That's right. This book was totally meant to be a practitioner's book, not an academic tome. I led one of the first consulting projects for a company had read some of the early writings about the idea and said, how do we apply this idea to develop the specification for our new smartphone? And it's hard to go from high-level concept to very detailed specification about 50 different features. So I developed a process which you need to make sure that you're asking the right questions, you're barking up the right tree, to go from high-level insight through to very detailed conclusions you can deploy.
You start out the book discussing the job map. Can you explain what that is a little bit and how it applies in practice?
You bet. We have created a process called the Jobs Roadmap that enables a company or entrepreneur to go from strategic direction that they're trying to set here, the questions or issues they're trying to address through deploying the set of tools, through to understanding what customers really need, even if it's not what they're saying they need today, understanding how to segment customers based on those sorts of criteria, what sorts of solutions are going to be successful, what barriers are going to get in the way from adopting them, how are you going to make money, and then given all that, what are the ideas that you're going to create and how do you bring them to market? We do not start with the idea. That is a huge mistake that a lot of companies make. You got to start with the strategy and the customer, and then use that to back into what ideas suit the circumstances that are most ripe for innovation.
Well, I think most of us, in innovation, okay, and, some of us maybe not as disruptive as what we may think, okay, but, yeah, and, the other thing I think is that old expression, inventors, okay, that seems really antiquated now, but they come up with an idea, they see something, they get this idea in the product and the app, and they kind of, become in love with their idea, right? It's their baby, all right? And it's easy to tell that person, oh, you got to find a hungry market first. But how does jobs be done fit into that? Because that's really a huge mind shift, isn't it?
Well, you got to be mindful about what your starting point is. You're not going to go into the steel mill business if you're trying to create hotels, right? So you have to start somewhere. But that being said, most people start way too narrowly. We use the example in the book an ice cream company. So, imagine, if you will, you're working for an ice cream company and your job is to sell more ice cream. We often do this as a focus group exercise. People come up with all these ideas about, okay, so what are we going to do? We can make it free. We can make it no calorie, tastes great, 100 different flavors, distribution everywhere. A lot of these ideas are impractical. They're not really something you can do much with, and they're not terribly novel either. Whereas if you change that perspective and say, okay, you as a customer, the specific last time that you had an ice cream, not times on average, but the specific last time you had an ice cream, why did you have an ice cream? If you hadn't had an ice cream, what would you have done? That leads people to totally different answers. I was enjoying a moment with my spouse, and we wanted to be spontaneous. I wanted to treat the kids or bribe the kids. I wanted to cool down after a hot day. And the competition is totally different as well. It's not Unilever and Nestle, but it's water, it's beer, it's coffee, it's doing nothing. So by taking that customer lens, you often discover that the opportunity area is a lot bigger than you thought, but also the competition is a lot vaster as well. And if you don't have that lens, you then just see the world through the viewpoint of your invention, your idea, which might have a lot of merit to it, but you're still going to miss a lot of opportunity and threat as well. So the jobs roadmap forces you into that, making things expansive and yet very process-driven so that you don't spend months boiling the ocean.
So is this how someone should really build a value proposition? Or, how does that coincide with a value proposition? Maybe is the right question.
People go out there and they first look at and they segment customers based on a little bit about what their starting point is, for sure, right? You got to have a relevant segmentation, and we provide means of doing that, looking at the jobs and what we call the job drivers to create those segments. And then based upon that, you can think about what are the value propositions that are relevant given the jobs to be done that those customer segments are looking to accomplish. And then subsequently, you can say, okay, how does my solution fit into that? Maybe it is the value proposition. Maybe it needs to combine with one or two other things to make it really compelling as well.
Design and even marketing, service design and stuff, we talk about customer experiences, journey maps, and all these things.
Right.
Okay. What's the difference between the job map and maybe is it complementary? Are they kind of a different animal, or kind of tie that together for me?
Sure. Well, yeah, you can think of these approaches as being nested. So the fundamental approach is that jobs roadmap. And that's actually the website for the book, jobsroadmap.com. And then within that, we have something that we call the jobs atlas, which gives you the lay of the land. It tells you what customers are trying to get done, what their current approaches are, and their pain points, and their success criteria, their obstacles, how they connote value in the market. And within one of those dimensions of the job atlas is the current approaches. For understanding current approaches, journey mapping is really important. But sort of by definition, journey mapping maps journeys that exist today. It doesn't look at what could be. It doesn't look at what people are not doing because it's too cumbersome or expensive or they don't know about it or it doesn't exist. Yes, it is important. Yes, it is a tool. We, I believe, have one of those in the book. But if you just focus on that, you're optimizing the world as it is and not as it might be.
The jobs map is pushing your boundaries a little bit then, right? It's looking kind of like that one step off of things. Would that be a fair connotation? Or
You bet. You bet. It forces people to step back and think in fresh ways about their market, what do customers really need? We echo the supposed quote from Henry Ford. If I asked customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. That was created by BMW in a small car segment that historically was very unattractive, not profitable. But they stepped back and they tried to understand what are people really trying to do to accomplish with their transportation choices. One of those jobs to be done was self-expression. And that wasn't being done terribly well by the universe of small cars that were out there. So the genius of the Mini was that it enabled almost infinite self-expression because of the huge number of combinations of accessories that you can put onto a Mini. And yet there were only a couple of chassis types, which is really what drives expense in making a car. So by stepping back and saying, okay, let's not think of this as a car company, but let's really understand what our target consumer is looking for, they were able to redefine who they were and in the process make huge profits in what historically wasn't a very attractive corner of the industry.
is this all kind of a qualitative type thinking, or is there any quantitative measurements within the job roadmap or in the jobs to be done framework?
Yeah, great question. So it has to start qualitatively. And some people have said you can just do it in a conference room talking to an employee, a company's own employees. Get out there, get out of your building, talk to actual customers. Sometimes you might observe them. Sometimes you might just ask them about their priorities or what they're doing in a day. But it's got to be in as naturalistic a way as possible, not force-fitting customers into your preconceived notions, because that's what you're using this process to escape. So get those qualitative insights and start framing the world as a customer might. And then, if appropriate, you can go out there and do a quantitative survey to get a little bit of dimension around that. But it's really important that you're asking the right questions in that survey. Right? I mean, if I asked you just point blank, what are you trying to do when you've got 3 minutes to stand in line? It's hard to enumerate that, and it's even harder to say, okay, the importance of doing that thing is a 7 and the satisfaction is a 3 out of 10. I mean, who knows, right? Because it's the wrong question. So you've got to use the quantitative to ask the right sort of questions, which are often not just about the jobs themselves, but about the circumstances that people find themselves in, which lead to them having certain jobs to be done.
Okay, well, here's the $1 million question. Who should be carrying out these interviews, right?
Look, I'm a big fan of people going out there themselves and doing at least some of the work themselves. I mean, sure, sometimes you just don't have the bandwidth and you get a market researcher to do that, and we do that for some companies. But even when we're contracted to do it, we strongly advocate that a company's own employees join us for a little bit. So I've done ethnographies of how people have dinner, for instance, in people's homes, and invite the employees to tag along with us. It's amazing not only what you can observe, but the visceral nature of the insight that you get is a more powerful and more thought-provoking thing to do than just looking at a PowerPoint, to actually experience the world as a customer might. And you can only do it if you get outside your four walls.
Who should read your book within an organization? Is it meant for top to bottom, or is it really? I mean, should marketers or sales guys read it also, or who should read it?
It really is meant to be a general book. So if you look at the back cover, we've got the first endorsement is the chief marketing officer from Frito-Lay. But then we also have people from strategy at Nestle. We've got the general manager for Internet of Things at Cisco. These are all right. Marketing and general management. Salespeople absolutely use it to try to decode how to open up a conversation with a customer, even if they don't have power to affect what they're selling. Just to understand the jobs to be done leads to a consultative sale in a way that we can preach the virtues of consultative selling and solution selling, but you got to understand what the need is in order to have the solution, have the consultation. Jobs to be done enables people to do that. And then in product development and R&D, there's big applicability for this. A lot of my thinking about jobs to be done came from working with people in R&D departments who were trying to get a less filtered view about what customers really needed, not some marketing person making up a list of marketing requirements, but direct input from the customer about what was and wasn't important and the trade-offs that they were willing to make to really accomplish some jobs that were being under-addressed by current solutions.
I'm going to go on my bandwagon here for a second, okay? But, what have always attracted me to the jobs to be done is that it always sort of got away from that customer experience journey map thing where we brought a group of people together and put all these post-it notes on the wall and here here's what we do and here's what we need to the future state we need to create and everything. Where job to be done sat into my mindset of kind of that service dominant logic type thinking that a product doesn't have any value till it's used, and in that use, if you have to go to where the product's used, you have to understand the use of the product, all right, which then makes, the customer centric, because you're looking past your product and even past his use a little bit, because the customer isn't centered till you get there, okay? And that's what the job to be done. It made customer centric real to me. Does that make any sense?
I am totally with you. So let's take that ice cream example again, right? If you're running an ice cream shop, you can journey map the experience inside the ice cream shop, and you can fine tune that. And undoubtedly, that's a good thing to do. I don't want to take away from it. But why are people coming to get an ice cream? The different circumstances that lead them into there can give you lots of new dimensions on which you can deliver satisfaction. And it's not just optimizing what you've got today. It's like using Six Sigma on an auto manufacturing line. So, by all means, optimize it, but Six Sigma isn't going to give you the Toyota production system, which was just a fundamental revolution in how you made a car. So you had to step back and really think a lot more broadly. Now, look, you're not going to do this for everything. For new cherry flavor or lemon flavor, it might be very similar to what people have been doing for 100 years. But there is opportunity all around us to reimagine what customers really need and how people can deliver on it. Look at smart water, for heaven's sakes, right? It's water with some electrolytes, but it's really expensive water because people realize there was a job to be done there. So there's opportunity, and it's not just in consumer products. Those are the easy examples to talk about. We've got a ton of examples in B2B there as well that are equally applicable.
Does it really fit in to the design thinking of the world and the design thinker, service designer, the lean startup? How does it match up with that?
Absolutely. So there is a company we use in the book as an example of how a company really institutionalized this process. We are 100% consistent with it. Where I think we excel with what we put out in jobs to be done is that there is a clear process here. Right, there are 8 elements to the jobs out list and a little bit more in the overall jobs roadmap that you can go through a step-by-step manner, particularly in larger companies, is that it's really tough to embrace the messiness. Companies don't work that way. So, if you can be messy, great. If you can't, that's okay. We have given people a very predictable, methodical way to get the insights they need.
I think the biggest pushback that someone gets in the jobs to be done is that the perception that it creates a lot of work. Okay, that there's a lot of things to do to accomplish it. And the job map isn't this post-it note, throw it up there on the wall. It's a step-by-step. It's work. Okay? Is there any truth to that, what I'm saying? Not for the lighthearted?
Well, no, I really think it depends. So, look, I have seen companies lot of work. And you can, right? If you're doing some global customer segmentation for a really complex product, there are multi-stakeholders, then yeah, that's work if you don't have any of the information. But a lot of it can be directed by what you know, and then you go out there and you get a little bit of insight. And it's amazing in 20 or 30 discussions how much you can learn and then distill insight from. Sometimes it's sitting right in front of you. I'll give you an example of a big bank we worked with that was trying to develop a product for cross-border mortgages, so expatriates buying property in a country. And it started out with some really boring, internally focused thinking. So the job when you get a mortgage is to get a mortgage. No, no, no. The job is to move into a home and make use of a home, and a mortgage is just part of that. So when you force people to step outside of that, then they can think a little bit, even on their own, about what's involved. But just going out to talk to people, what mattered to them? Well, currency rates and security for when they're away and who's going to fix a plumbing break. All things that were addressable, but nobody really addressed them in a comprehensive way before. So in the space of weeks, for very part-time allocations for anybody on the project, they were able to cobble together something that was really unique in the marketplace and extremely profitable, priced way over traditional mortgage because it was different. So it doesn't have to take a huge amount of time. What it does take is a very modest amount of time and open thinking. If you don't have permission to think openly, then you're not going to get the sorts of insights that you might.
Okay. Well, I have to say, just like your last book, okay, the balance of theory to practicality was excellent. I did not walk away from it thinking it would be my last time or that I would not put the material to use. I want to compliment you on that.
Well, thanks. I have worked on many books over the years, not just capturing new markets. But what I saw time and again is people love the big ideas, but their job to be done is to do something different, not just to get a big idea, but to do something different. And so, people would call and say, okay, well, what do I do about this? What, next week, what do I do? I have really tried in chapter after chapter to give people practical tools and tell them at the end of it, here's a quick summary of what you learned in the chapter. I realize people don't have the opportunity to read books even once through, much less several times. So you got to make it a toolkit that people can really have on their desks and use.
Tell me, how can people find out more about the book and connect up with New Market Advisors?
Sure. So the website for the book is jobsroadmap.com. Jobs with an S. And that website actually lives on the company's site for New Markets Advisors. So there you can click my profile there. You can click the Contact Us button. My email is swunker@newmarketsadvisors.com. Markets with an S, advisors with an S. So we are happy to connect anyway. But really, I think the best way to get started is go to the website, jobsroadmap.com. There's downloadable tools. There's a downloadable chapter there. And that really get you more familiar with this. And you can always check out the affiliated website, which is just one tab over for capturing new markets as well.
Okay, well, that's awesome, Stephen. I would like to thank you very much. This podcast will be available on the Business 901 iTunes Store and the Business 901 blog site. So thanks, everyone, for listening.